A synagogue, according to Jewish tradition, must have windows. It must have windows because a synagogue can't just be about our souls and our hearts. It has to also be about the outside world. We at Temple Judea are proud not only of our brand new synagogue, but also of the fact that we're deeply involved in the community, that we live what the Talmud teaches, al tifrosh min hatzibur, that we cannot separate ourselves from our community. And that's why we're proud to host this forum this evening.
We particularly want to welcome Congressman Berman, Congressman Sherman, and Mark Reed. Mr. Reed, just looking at the podiums, it fills the adage, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. I worked on that all day. You know, there is a Talmudic precedent for what we're going to do tonight. The great debates of Hillel and Shammai, the rabbinic machlokets, and the Talmud, where they argued deeply and oftentimes heatedly, but they always argued L'Shem Shamayim, for the sake of heaven. Our prayer and our hope tonight, for the sake of our community, for the sake of our country, and for the sake of heaven, is that what we do this evening rises to the same accord. It's our pleasure to welcome you all here and to turn it over to Rob Eshman of the Jewish Journal.
Thank you all for coming. I really want to extend our thanks to Temple Judea, who's welcomed us into this beautiful sanctuary. So thank you. Just a few things to get through before we get to the debate. I wanted to acknowledge the presence here in our audience of Congressman Henry Waxman, Supervisor Zev Yaroslavsky, Councilwoman Jan Perry, Councilman Tony Cardenas, Councilman Dennis Zine, and Santa Monica Councilman Bobby Shriver. I also appreciate the presence of the Jewish Journal board members who are here, especially our chair, Peter Lowy. Finally, I want to thank our sponsor, Westfield, without whom this would not have been possible. And I also want to thank the Jewish Journal, which always strives to promote vigorous debate on important issues. So the rules for tonight's debate, they're very simple. Each candidate will have 90 seconds for an opening remark. The order of the opening and closing remarks were determined by the drawing of straws beforehand and posted on YouTube in case any of you doubt us. After opening remarks, the moderator will then direct questions to individual candidates who will have 90 seconds to respond, and the others will have a chance to respond in 45 seconds at the moderator's discretion. There is a timekeeper on hand, Courtney Rainey, who's been instrumental in organizing this, and I want to remind you that you're in a holy place, so if you run over your time, who knows what may happen. Our questioners tonight are Jewish Journal staff writer Jonah Lowenfeld, the creator and writer of the Sherman versus Berman blog, Bill Boyarsky, our Jewish Journal columnist, and myself. And before we begin, I'd just like to ask the audience to treat the debate with the respect that these candidates, the job they seek, and the sanctuary deserves. Now, please welcome the candidates. Okay, there seems to be a small problem.
Howard went home.
Somebody's going to bring in Howard, I assume. Congressman Berman, right? Oh, okay. I also received notice that Assemblyman Bob Blumenfeld is here as well. Thank you for coming. As we wait for Howard Berman, after Congressman Berman comes in, we're all going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and then Jonah Lowenfeld is going to introduce the candidates briefly. There you are. I guess the first question is, what are you going to do about traffic?
That's not why I was
Thank you. Could you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, face the flag? And I'll ask all three candidates to start us off. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Jonah?
It's an honor to introduce the candidates participating in tonight's debate. I'll be very brief, and I'll start from stage left and move across the stage. Democratic Congressman Brad Sherman has been representing San Fernando Valley voters in Congress since 1997. He's a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the ranking Democrat on its subcommittee on terrorism, nonproliferation, and trade. He is also a member of the House Committee on Financial Services. Before being elected to Congress, Congressman Sherman served for 5 years on California's State Board of Equalization, 4 of them as that board's chairman. Standing beside Congressman Sherman is Democratic Congressman Howard Berman. Congressman Berman has represented the San Fernando Valley in Congress since 1983. He is the ranking Democrat on the House Committee on Foreign Affairs and a member of the House Committee on the Judiciary. Before being elected to Congress, Congressman Berman served for 10 years as a member of the California State Assembly. Our third candidate is Mark Reed. Mr. Reed, a Republican, is an actor, small businessman, and rancher, born and raised in the San Fernando Valley. This is the second time Mr. Reed has run for Congress. In 2010, Mr. Reed unsuccessfully challenged Congressman Sherman in the old 27th District. Welcome to all the candidates, and thank you very much for being here. Thank you.
We'll start with Congressman Sherman. When CNN's Wolf Blitzer asked...
Excuse me, Bill, are we giving opening statements?
Oh, yes. The opening statement by the drawing of straws, the first one goes to Mr. Mark Reed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. The opening statement, the first one goes to Mr. Mark Reed.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This election is not about Congressman Sherman or Berman, Republican or Democrat, Jewish or not Jewish. It's about you versus the status quo. It's about the failed policies of the last 30 years. It's about a $15 trillion debt that's tying our hands behind our back in foreign policy and destroying our ability to compete in the global economy. It's about a Muslim uprising in the Middle East that's threatening the very existence of Israel. It's about a nuclear Iran that has vowed to destroy Israel. It's about our global economy and how it relates to our national security. Locally, it's about double-digit unemployment. It's about 80,000 home foreclosures. It's about 1 out of every 3 mom-and-pop stores closing their doors. It's about several top-tier companies leaving the valley and not coming back. It's about our senior citizens' quality of life and their security. It's about our youth and the lack of opportunities if we keep on these failed policies of the last 30 years, of which both of these men have participated in creating. These two men will try to convince you that they're both proven leaders. Might I remind you that General Custer was considered a leader by the men who followed him to their deaths. This election is about you and the future of this great nation. Regardless of who you vote for, make sure that they're willing to follow your lead and not their party's lead. Thank you.
Congressman Sherman.
Hello, I'm Brad Sherman from America's best named city, Sherman Oaks. I know a number of you are upset with the format tonight because they haven't allocated a full 90 minutes for Brad Sherman to discuss what's going on in Washington. That's why you should join me at Reseda High School, 3 p.m. this Sunday, where we'll have our 160th Valley Town Hall. I'm proud that without my efforts, we wouldn't be building that new lane on the 405 freeway. That it was my efforts that caused the Department of Justice to say that Jewish students were entitled to protection on campuses across this state under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, and to have led the fight against the $700 billion bailout and forced changes that have saved America hundreds of billions of dollars. Now, I know Howard disagreed with me on the TARP bill, but he agrees with me that super PACs are so bad that we ought to amend the Constitution to make sure that unlimited corporate money does not pollute this race here in the San Fernando Valley. In January, I proposed to Howard that we both sign an anti-super PAC pledge. He declined on the basis that I was a stuntman and a rodeo clown. Then on MSNBC, he declined to sign the pledge on the theory that I was a nervous guy, and then sent out a brochure saying I was gum under your shoe. Don't be distracted by the personal attacks. Ask him why he won't sign the Super PAC pledge. I am the only congressman here who has called for the release of Jonathan Pollard, who stands with the Holocaust victims, and who wants to move the embassy to Jerusalem now without exception. Thank you.
Congressman Berman.
I love a positive vision. My thanks to the Jewish Journal for sponsoring this forum. Politicians are skilled at filling the air with promises of what they will do. But here, with two long-term incumbents, the best predictor of what we will do is whether we've made a difference up till now. And on that test, the answer is clear-cut. It's not a close call. A large increase in police patrolling valley streets, a more secure Israel, jobs saved by combating piracy, tough sanctions on Iran. On this and so much more, I've made a difference. The legislative process in Washington is broken, but in spite of the venom and polarization, I am able to make a difference because I am able, willing, and good at building partnerships with the other party, with the Senate, Democratic and Republican administrations, and frequently with diplomats and foreign leaders. Part of that success comes from not always trying to get credit, but in this hotly contested campaign, I must and will blow my trumpet more loudly so that the voters will know, that if they want someone who can make things happen in Washington, someone who will be more effective on their behalf, someone who will make a difference, I am the right choice.
Thank you. Bill? Thank you, everyone.
Congressman Sherman. When CNN's Wolf Blitzer asked Speaker Newt Gingrich what his response would be if Israel notified him, as president, that Israel was attacking Iran, Gingrich's response was that he would ask Israel what he could do to help. Do you agree with the way the Obama administration has handled Iran's nuclear program? Or would you be more on the Gingrich line of asking Israel what it could do to help? And finally, should the United States caution Israel against launching a strike against Iran?
I don't think that Israel is going to listen to cautions from the United States. Israel faces an existential threat. Israel will do what Israel finds necessary. The reason why Israel has to think of taking military action is because the United States has been incredibly slow to apply severe economic sanctions and still doesn't do so today. I have been pressing for sanctions since 1998. I have criticized every Secretary of State for not imposing those sanctions, and I have introduced by far the strictest bill to impose sanctions on Iran. I was pushing for sanctions against the Central Bank of Iran long before anyone else, and when it came to refined petroleum, I was the chief Democratic sponsor of Kirk's bill long before Congress took action, long before the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee would consider taking that bill up. If Israel takes action, then we in the pro-Israel community will need to explain things to to the American people, because there will be an increase in gasoline prices. We need to explain that the fault is the Iranians who insist upon developing nuclear weapons. The fault is with three American administrations that have gone slow on sanctions. And Israel will do what Israel needs to do, and we need to do in the pro-Israel community what we need to do.
First, Congressman Berman, and then Mr. Reed on this question.
The focus of our strategy now is not debating hypotheticals on what will happen if. Those are not particularly useful debates to have in public. The focus of our strategy should be to impose and continue to impose the toughest possible game-changing sanctions on the Iranian regime so that we change their decision. The fact is, while I have many disagreements with the Obama administration on different aspects of Middle East policy, there has never been an administration that has focused as much attention, as much time, as much diplomatic credit, in many cases, in partnership with much of the things that I'm doing, to try and create that international community that will support those sanctions. It's working. The rial is fallen by 50%. The leadership of Iran is disheveled. They can't get their ships insured. They can't even get their petroleum exported as much as they want. Pursue this course with tougher sanctions on the central bank and on all aspects of Iranian economic behavior, and you will see them abandon their nuclear weapons program. That is our goal. That's what we have to do with more vigor than ever.
Thank you.
Mr. Reed,
Mr.
Reed, do you think that's all going to work?
I'm just going to remind the candidates that you have 45 seconds during rebuttal. We have a lot of questions tonight.
Absolutely. Did he cut into my time?
No, go on.
I thought I got the same time.
The truth of it is, ever since Jimmy Carter's days, the administrations have failed to project strength in the Middle East. Sanctions haven't worked. They have discussed that they have not worked. I've listened to both of these individuals spew a stronger stance in regards to Iran ever since this election has come about, because they know that the focus of the Middle East is one of their weak points. The reality of it is Iran and Israel are backed up in a corner, and we need to actually have crippling sanctions. However, Barack Obama asked Howard Berman to actually water them down, but when this election came about, he refused to do it. Brad Sherman was requested by myself to denounce the Palestinian Authority's resolution for state recognition. He refused to do it. He refused to denounce the DNC's endorsement of anti-Israel organizations.
Thank you. Is someone looking for a rebuttal? Congressman Sherman?
Yes. I have, of course, denounced the efforts of the Palestinians to get recognition for a state without negotiations. And while it is true that the Obama administration has done more than prior administrations to sanction Iran, it isn't nearly enough.
Thank you. Congressman Berman?
Yes. I'm the author of the toughest sanctions that ever been imposed on Iran, and the administration is implementing them just the way they should be. The fact is that the legislation only works when you build the international coalition. That's what we have done. We have built an international coalition. We've been sanctioning Iran since 1979 unilaterally. To what effect? Only if we can get the others, the Europeans, the Japanese, the South Koreans, and the Chinese and the Indians. And that's where you have to leave the military option on the table as a real threat, so they will understand the consequences of not going along with our sanction strategy.
Thank you. It started with your rebuttal, so I promise you'll have an opportunity to speak. That leads into the question that I'm going to ask you, Congressman Berman, on this subject. I'd like to know if you feel that the actions taken in the Senate this week are constructive, On Thursday, a bipartisan group of senators, 32 senators, sponsored a resolution saying that they reject any policy of containment when it comes to, and I quote, a nuclear weapons capable Iran. Nuclear weapons capable Iran is the key phrase here. It's somewhat vague. And at the news conference introducing the resolution, Senator Joe Lieberman of Connecticut said, I guess everybody will determine for themselves what that means. There's been much discussion of the differences between how Israel perceives what the Iranian threat looks like and when it becomes real, and how the United States perceives that. If similar legislation or resolution were to be introduced in Congress, how would you answer the question, what does a nuclear weapons capable Iran mean?
Thank you for the question. The answer is, not only do I not disagree with what the Senate resolution is, I will be offering with Ileana Ross-Layton in the companion measure when we get back to Washington a week from today. So the fact, and this is the critical part. As Iran burrows its enrichment program and its facilities underground, the test has to be whether Iran has an indigenous nuclear weapons capability that cannot be damaged or destroyed, delayed or eliminated by a military option, because at that particular point, Iran has a nuclear weapon, and anytime they want it, and there's nothing the rest of us can do. And when that happens, everything changes. Iran with a nuclear weapon means the end of the non-proliferation regime. It means the possibility that the people in power there could utilize that weapon against Israel. It turns the rest of the region into Iran's puppets in terms of oil pricing and every other political strategy. And in the long term, it means the Saudis have a nuclear weapon, the Turks have a nuclear weapon, the Egyptians have a nuclear weapon. And when that happens, the risk of nuclear confrontation increases exponentially.
Mr. Reed, I was hoping you would answer a similar question. Is there daylight between the administration and Israel, between the United States and Israel, when it comes to how they perceive the reality and the imminence of the Iranian nuclear threat?
I think that they're not really focusing on the reality of it is. And the reality of the fact that Iran has declared Israel that they want to annihilate it, and they've been working on that for 30 years. All of the sanctions that have been put in place since '76 have not worked. They're focused on it. We go through 4-year presidential cycles. They wait out. This is why the sanctions are not working. Iran wants to destroy Israel. They deny the Holocaust. They deny Israel's rights to exist. They support Hamas, Hezbollah, and every terrorist organization to disrupt Israel. So the daylight that is there is just a blind denial and an appeasement of this administration of the Middle East, of Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, and the rest of the dictators in the region.
Mr. Reed, don't you think that Israel ought to just blast Iran and take care of this?
I wish it was that simple. However, America is the one that actually has the capacity to put together a coalition of the Middle Eastern nations that actually oppose Iran having a nuclear bomb. If Israel goes at it alone, Israel will then be singled out by every group there, and it'll create more problems for Israel than not. America has an obligation as the world superpower to take the lead on this. However, if America doesn't do that, then I am in support of Israel actually taking out the nuclear facilities.
Thank you. Congressman Sherman, this next question is for you. At the last time that the candidates convened, you said that the war in Iraq was a mistake. And earlier this week, I heard that the United Nations sent a group of nuclear inspectors to go see what the situation in Iran actually is and what they could determine. And I couldn't help but have this weird, vague sense of deja vu. What are you doing to make sure that 10 years from now, you're not addressing another group of voters and saying to them, well, that war in Iran was a mistake?
Well, your question proposes that I'm proposing a war against Iran. The fact is, we had inspectors going into Iraq. They didn't find any weapons of mass destruction. Now, nerve gas can be hidden so maybe they could have missed it. But serious nuclear programs cannot be hidden. So the inspectors found nothing in Iraq. In contrast, the inspectors have told us what's going on in Iran. They're building nuclear capacity. Now, they say they're doing it to generate electricity. This is a country that flares its natural gas. If you have free natural gas that you can't export because you don't have a pipeline or liquefaction capacity, why are you building a nuclear facility? That's like saying, I've got the turkey and the bread and the tomato laid out, but am I making a sandwich? There is no other purpose. Iran is building a nuclear weapon, and there is simply, the only doubt is, what should the civilized world do about it? Howard believes that we should only have those sanctions that the Europeans agree to. I believe in the law, and it's been the law since the mid-90s, and that is secondary sanctions. That if a corporation is doing the wrong things with regard to Iran, that we limit their ability to do business in the United States. By threatening to do that, we can get corporations to do the right thing. If we just have the sanctions the Europeans agree with, it's too little, too late. And that describes the policy we've had until very recently.
Congressman Berman, you want to respond?
It's one thing when a candidate distorts your record, but it's another thing when the candidate knows that his distortion is not true. The notion that I am going to go for the lowest common denominator is totally contrary to everything I've done in Washington, including the sanctions legislation that I got through and got the Obama administration to support and start implementing. We have heavy sanctions on most of their financial institutions, and I'm aiming to get them on all. We are going after the central bank. We are sanctioning companies that are selling refined petroleum. We are sanctioning companies that are making energy investments. All of those sanctions go far beyond the international communities and the Security Council's resolution. I would never accept the Security Council or even the Europeans as the bottom line on what sanctions should be applied, and for him to invert the truth is Brad.
Congressman Sherman, are you? Please. Congressman Sherman, are you inverting the truth?
I'm here to speak the truth. The fact is that Mark Kirk proposed the refined petroleum sanctions in 2007. They couldn't get a hearing in 2008. We needed to act much more quickly. Mr. Berman has given many addresses where he says that he delayed the passage of the Sasada legislation in coordination with the Obama administration. That should have been law. We should have had those sanctions in 2007. Then we have the effective Menendez-Kirk sanctions on the central bank. The Foreign Policy magazine says that Howard was leading the effort to water them down and delay them until Brad Sherman called him on it, and then he changed sides. Now, that isn't me.
Thank you very much.
That's Foreign Policy magazine.
Thank you very much. Mr. Reed.
Copies of which are available.
Mr. Reed, do you absolutely need to address something that either of the two candidates have said? Because I'd really like to move on to another issue.
Absolutely. I can keep it quite short.
take it
Like
really
I said
quick.
in my beginning arguments, these individuals, 30 years of policies have failed. The sanctions have failed. We're listening to them argue back and forth who proposed the best piece of legislation that has failed because Iran is getting the bomb. Iran has actually told Israel, we're going to wipe you off the map. They just keep buying time. I don't care how much they say what they've done 5 years, 10 years ago, it has not worked. Iran is intent on getting the bomb and taking Israel off the face of the map.
Great. Thank you very much. Conversations about Iran are often conversations about Israel. We'd like to turn this to a specific question about Israel. One question of fact to let the voters of the 30th District know you guys a little bit better. Answer this as quickly as you can. Mr. Reed, we'll start with you and we'll just go. When was the last time that you were in Israel and under what circumstances?
I have not had the privilege to visit Israel myself. I have a tremendous amount of friends that are from Israel and from the IDF, and I am looking forward to the opportunity of visiting Israel.
Thank you. Congressman Berman?
Israel in late 2009, spring of 2009, 2008, and probably 8 or 9 times in the last 10 to 15 years.
Business or pleasure?
Every single one of them is business, I assure you. Not that I couldn't have a lot of pleasure in Israel.
Congressman Sherman?
I haven't been in Israel as often as Mr. Berman. I was there to see the PLO change its charter in the year 2000 with President Clinton, and I'm there to fight for Israel in Washington, D.C. That's why I'm the lead Democrat on the letter to say that the president should not seek an exception to the U.S. law that says no U.S. money for UNESCO when UNESCO invites the Palestinians to join as a state.
I'm glad
That's why.
I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because I was curious. I saw that letter. It's an 180-page document, and you found a footnote that is right there that's so significant, apparently, that you wanted to join with the chairwoman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. I was curious, Congressman Berman, have you or will you sign that letter that says, and just to clarify for everyone, UNESCO voted to recognize a state of Palestine in October of last year, and Congressman Sherman has sent a letter urging the State Department not to attempt to restore funding to UNESCO. Congressman Berman, would you sign that letter?
Jonah, why don't you go through the facts accurately, if you don't mind?
Help me.
A guy named Howard Berman, in 1994, chairing the State Department Authorization Committee, put in a provision that said if the Palestinians sought and obtained membership in any UN-affiliated organization, money was stopped automatically, and there was no waiver. The money, because of that provision, the moment UNESCO, members of UNESCO voted to bring the Palestinian Authority in, was cut off. There is not a chance in the world that Congress will appropriate $1 for that. By the way, it's sort of sad because the Director General of UNESCO is doing wonderful things in a lot of areas, but the fact is the international community has to understand America is not going to participate in the delegitimization of Israel, in circumventing the peace process and direct negotiations, and so we're going to stand strong and we're going to not appropriate a single dollar. Brad's looking for things to do. He sends a letter about an issue that's not an issue. But
Excuse me.
Okay, thank you very much. Brad,
Congressman Sherman, briefly.
Ileana Ross-Layton is organizing the letter. She was not looking for things to do. She is not running against Howard Berman. She is doing her job as chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. She asked me, as a stalwart supporter of Israel, to organize on the Democratic side. That's how that letter came about. It's not my letter, it's Ileana Ross-Layton's letter.
2 people writing a letter about a non-issue.
Mr. Reed, the next question's to you, and it's on generally the same topic. President Obama has made clear his commitment to a 2-state solution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and both Democrats at this debate have supported talks towards this end. At this point in time, do you agree with that? And do you think Congress should take steps to encourage both sides to return to negotiations?
As the Prime Minister stated in one of his glorious talks, is that if the Palestinians put down their arms, there would be peace. And if Israel put down their arms, there would be no more Israel. We are not the all too individuals to tell Israel what to do in any circumstance. I look at it as like a respectful marriage between a husband and wife. You have a disagreement, you don't talk about it in the public. We can talk with the Prime Minister behind the scenes and tell him what we will support and what we won't support. But Obama's administration coming out publicly and telling them to go back to the 67 borders, telling them that the settlements are wrong and they need to roll them back, is utterly disrespectful to a country that walks side by side. The complete silence of these 2 individuals pertaining to Barack Obama's complete disrespect of Israel in the last 3 years has been shocking. The fact that the lack of strength projected by this administration and past administrations in the Middle East is creating the issues that we have now. Going back to UNICEF and the letter, it's $1 late, $1 short and a day late. I asked Brad Sherman, do you denounce the Palestinian Authority's resolution to the UN for statehood? He refused to denounce it. Now it comes up later and after the fact. It's too late. That's what I've said about these individuals and their policies.
Congressman Berman, you want to respond?
Bibi Netanyahu, the leader of Likud, has indicated over and over again he will go to Ramallah, he will meet in Jerusalem, he will meet tonight, he will meet tomorrow to start negotiations. These negotiations haven't started because of his settlement policies. It's not his intransigence. These negotiations haven't started because Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, doesn't have either the will or the strength to make the compromises he knows he will have to make to get an independent state for the Palestinian people. And that's why these talks haven't started. And he's looking for every other way out, the UN, reconciliation, in order to avoid confronting the fact that he can't cut the deal.
Congressman Sherman.
I agree with Howard Berman on his characterization of the Palestinians. Negotiations need to start now, and they need to be unconditional. I have often denounced every attempt by the PLO to get statehood in any way other than negotiations, and I've worked hard to lobby for votes at the UN against that effort. Mr. Reed, there is a bit of a difference. You say that I've never questioned President Obama on these issues. When President Obama said 67 borders, I criticized the president. Others here criticized those of us who criticized the president. I'm loyal to my party quite often, but when my president makes a mistake and says the starting point for negotiations is 67 borders, that's wrong.
Congressman Berman, that seemed to be directed to you.
There's only one of the three of us on this podium who spent 2 hours on the night before the Security Council vote pushing this administration to get to stand up and veto the resolution at the Security Council condemning Israel for its settlement policy. Only one. There's only one person on this podium that when the Egyptian protesters are threatening the lives of the Israelis in their embassy in Cairo, the ambassador calls and says, can you call the chief of military intelligence in Egypt and get him to protect those settlers? The fact is, over and over again, I'm the person that the Israeli Prime Minister's office and the Israeli ambassador call to help ensure that Israel's security and Israel's survival is enhanced.
Thank you very much.
Sherman referenced me. I'll go quick.
We're running short on, we have
10
domestic
seconds.
policy issues to get to, and we did want to address one question to all three candidates. So we'll go in order in the opposite direction that we went last time when we addressed this question. Congressman Sherman, on Sunday, Republican Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham advocated arming the rebels in Syria who are trying to topple Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. You were an outspoken critic of the way President Obama decided to support the rebels in Libya, who in October brought down the dictatorship of Muammar Gaddafi. Over 5,000 Syrians have been killed in the last 11 months by Assad's government. Would you support arming the rebels in Syria?
I might very well if I saw a plan that would keep the weapons out of the al-Qaeda elements in Syria. But let me set the record straight with regard to Libya. I would have, and made it clear on the floor of the House, supported a proper resolution authorizing the president with the right approach to aid the rebels in Libya. But it's not just about the rule of law in Libya and giving those folks the chance for democracy. It's about the rule of law in the United States. I stood up for the War Powers Act that limits the president's right to send our troops into harm's way for long periods of time. That act says that after 90 days, he needs congressional authorization. A good action in foreign policy that undermines the U.S. Constitution and undermines the War Powers Act may do as much harm to our institutions of democracy as it does benefit for the institutions of democracy in Libya. There were a couple other problems I had with the Libya policy. One was that when we had the authority, the power to do so, we did not insist that they purge themselves of the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group. And the second was that the Gaddafi money frozen by the Department of Treasury should have been made available for our costs in that, rather than turning first, foremost, and exclusively to the U.S. taxpayer.
But Congressman Sherman, the fact is that a tyrant was overthrown and killed. Freedom, or a more democratic government, was brought to Libya. In fact, it worked. Do you have any regrets now that you look back with criticisms that some might say are just legalisms?
The American Constitution is not a flimsy piece of legalism. The American Constitution is carefully balanced as to what are the powers of the president and what are the powers of Congress. The War Powers Act does an excellent job harmonizing different elements of the Constitution. I don't know whether we are going to see a democratic Libya, but we cannot assume that our Constitution is a legalism and that we are then going to preserve the institutions in the United States.
Thank you.
The fact is, if we decide that any president, for any reason, can send American troops into harm's way for any length of time, that may do more harm to us than we could possibly do good for the people of Libya.
Thank you, Congressman Sherman. I do want to get a chance to pose the same question to the other two candidates. Congressman Berman, we'll start with you.
Yeah,
Maybe
a couple of seconds just on Syria, because
that's what I'm hoping that you
I
would
thought.
respond on. How should Congress respond to the slaughter of thousands of Syrians?
First of all,
And should they arm the
let's
rebels?
establish what our interests are. With all the uncertainty about what might replace it, and there are definitely elements in the opposition that I'm very uncomfortable with and do not trust, it is in our interest for the Assad regime to fall, because Syria is the greatest enabler of Iran and of Hezbollah, and that's because of the Assad regime. So make no mistake, in a geopolitical sense, we have a fundamental national security interest in the Assad regime falling. Secondly, we are providing a variety of different kinds of assistance, some of it not so obvious. Third, while we know who the exiles are, the Syrian National Council, I've met with them and we've talked to them, there is no unified rebellion inside Syria. Who do you arm? How do you get the arms to them? There are complicated questions. I've been to several, and again, I'm the only person of the three up here who has spent several hours in the last 2 weeks at intelligence briefings, classified briefings, open to all members of the Foreign Affairs Committee on this subject. So I want to do what works to help make Assad fall. I'm not going to, at this particular point, speculate about what kind of arms should go to them. They are getting arms, by the way, on the black market, through exiles, through capturing ammunition depots and weapons depots in Syria. But I'm not going to speculate now about the right time or whether there's a time to send their arms. But the fundamental issue is our interests, American interests, the interests of the international community are in the Assad regime falling.
Just to clarify, in your view, is Congressman Sherman's concern about al-Qaeda elements getting hold of these arms a real concern?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Reed.
I listened to Brad Sherman's, discussion about the Constitution and pertaining to the War Powers Act and so forth. I think there's something in the Constitution that also talks about forbidding the United States to nation build in other countries. The military experts have not identified the combatants in Syria. so they have no clue who to arm. In Libya, it was an actual catastrophic failure because there was over 1,500 surface-to-air missiles that are not accounted for. We still don't know where they're at. Can they be smuggled into America? Can we get planes hit in New York, in Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego? We have no clue where a lot of these arms went to. As pertaining to arming other countries, we do not know who we're arming, and it has been proven that we actually stood on the side unknowingly with Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, the Muslim Brotherhood, and people who are actually vehemently against the United States.
Okay, thank you very much for all of these thoughts on foreign policy. We're going to move the conversation to domestic policy now. And we're going to focus on what is, I imagine, on the minds of most of your constituents, the economy and our economic situation.
Well, the unemployment rate I was reading today in Tarzana is 13.4%, which is substantially above the unemployment rate in the United States. And the unemployment rate in Tarzana here is 13.4%, which is higher than the national rate. In addition, there's a tremendous number of long-term unemployed, people who've been out of work a long time, people who have gone to, people who've gone to places that help the unemployed find that, people have been out for years, still looking for jobs. I'll start with you, Congressman Berman. What do you propose to do something to get these people to work, to reduce unemployment?
Well, we have a tried and true method. It's called, to deal with a crisis in employment, short-term stimulus. We tried it in 2000. We tried it in 2009. There wasn't enough infrastructure components in it, and it did a lot of good. Things would be quite different now if we hadn't done it, but these current rates of unemployment are unacceptable. But let me tell you what I do all the time. The biggest industry in the San Fernando Valley is the entertainment industry. That's the biggest private sector industry. And I spend a huge amount of my time working to combat the piracy of films and music. And I'm sort of the recognized leader in that effort. And secondly, to create the incentives to make sure that when the Canadians and the Australians provide special subsidies to lure our film productions to their countries, that we create competing tax incentives to ensure that they stay here. And I was the leader of that effort. But every day, this issue of the unemployment and how we can bring it down concerns me. It is the most immediate short-term problem we have.
Congressman Sherman, a lot of those unemployed have not worked in the film industry. A lot of them are accountants, construction workers, clerks, all kinds of people whose contact with the film industry is going to a movie, or what they did when they could afford it. What about those people? I mean, nobody seems to be helping them.
The entertainment industry is of some importance. The SOPA bill, I think, was not well designed. And I look forward to supporting a much, much different version as it develops. I've supported the National Infrastructure Bank, which will allow cities like Los Angeles to build over the next 10 years what we plan to build over the next 30 years. Projects that voters looked at and supported so much that we agreed to tax ourselves with additional sales tax to pay for them. Of critical importance to the economy here in the San Fernando Valley is housing. And I've used my role as a senior member of the Financial Services Committee to work to prevent another dramatic decline in home values here. Because even if you're not buying a home, even if you're not selling a home, if you hear that the home down the street sold for $100,000 less, or that they cut the price $100,000 and they still can't sell it, you're not taking your family out to dinner unless the restaurant has golden arches in front of it. The economy of the San Fernando Valley depends upon us at least stabilizing home prices. Here's what I've done. First, I led the effort in Congress to tell the regulators no to the proposed regulation that would require a 20% down payment for anybody buying a home, no matter how good their credit was. 285 members of Congress joined me in that effort. Second, we were able to get FHA's limit for high-cost areas like the Valley raised to $729,750. That is critical to anybody trying to sell a home south of the Boulevard. I have championed these efforts, and I look forward to getting more time to tell you about more. And I see there are some realtors in the crowd who know what I've done.
So what about getting that unemployment rate lowered right away here?
The U6 has us actually in the United States at a 16-17% unemployment rate because of the people falling off the rolls. Second of all, the entertainment industry is not the #1 industry in the San Fernando Valley. It was the aerospace industry. And since over the last 40 years it's been gutted and we do not have an aerospace plan anymore. The second one is manufacturing, machinists here in the San Fernando Valley. These have been gutted as well. I know that Congressman Berman is pretty much funded by the entertainment industry, so he's going to stand up for the entertainment industry, but I've been involved in the entertainment industry my entire life, and same thing with my grandfather and my uncle who have won Oscars in it. They have talked about the gutting of the entertainment industry, and it's gutted, it's gone. The Indian community actually owns quite a few of the post-production, and most of it goes up to Canada anymore. It's done, it's gone, the infrastructure is not here. But as pertaining to housing, if we don't have jobs, Mr. Sherman, how can you buy or sell a house if there's no jobs in the San Fernando Valley? If the banking industry does not want to loan you money, what does it mean to have an FHA loan cap here? It doesn't mean anything to an individual who does not have a job.
Thank you. Congressman Berman, then Congressman Sherman, you'll both have a chance to respond.
There's no doubt there are tremendous pressures on that industry, but the notion that an industry that now employs 140,000 people directly and a large number of jobs indirectly has been gutted and is worthless and should be discarded is unbelievable that you would say that. Secondly, when my colleague, Mr. Sherman, brags about his opposition to TARP, every major economist in the country says that without TARP, we would have lost 8.5 million more jobs. Without TARP, the growth rate would have declined even greater than it did. It's like somebody saying, I'm not going to put out the fire in the neighborhood because the guy who started the fire was smoking in bed. It was a foolish vote. It was a foolish position given the situation in October of 2008.
Thank you.
Thousands of economists and hundreds of millions of Americans know that the TARP program was a bad program that shattered the social contract in the United States. That program was so bad that they ultimately didn't carry it out. The program people voted for was the Toxic Asset Relief Program. We shined enough light on it, so instead they purchased preferred stock. If they don't ask an MBA, ask an 11-year-old. What's a better investment, preferred stock or the toxic assets which were the focus of that program? We saved hundreds of billions of dollars because we forced the administration of George Bush to abandon the plan that it named the bill after. I support Section 181 and played an important role in getting breaks, especially for production here in the United States. I think that we need that manufacturing. That's why I've opposed the bad trade deals that have shipped our jobs overseas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to move to one question that you both spoke about. Congressman Sherman, I'll address this to you first. As far as I could tell this morning, when I looked at the Library of Congress's website, you're still a co-sponsor of the SOPA legislation. Now, for those who are not familiar, this is the Stop Online Piracy Act. It was introduced into Congress. Most people didn't pay much attention to it until sometime last month a number of nonprofit and for-profit Silicon Valley companies and many, many, many internet users across America raised their voices collectively to say that there was something wrong with this bill. Congressman Sherman, if the bill was badly designed, why did you co-sponsor it in the first place, and why are you still listed as a co-sponsor?
If you'll read the congressional record, I put a statement in that record saying that my co-sponsorship is a symbol that I want the bill to go forward through the process, but it may very well need changes. The more I studied that bill, the more I agree with the manager's amendment that makes major changes in the bill, and I think we need some additional changes. I support the concept, the objective of that bill, which is not always popular, but it is that there's no such thing as free music and free movies. That we, as popular as it is to say free popcorn, free pizza, and free beer, the fact is that if you don't pay for entertainment, that entertainment industry will shrivel up. So I think that the bill needs very substantial work, but I've gone to the high schools of this valley and explained to people who may not get it right away, who are used to downloading stuff for free, that if we don't pay for our entertainment, that entertainment industry will fade away.
The core question, though, seems to be who pays and where and when. If you had to assemble a table of people that would construct a solution to how to craft a better bill, who would you invite?
I think you invite both Silicon Valley and Hollywood, and at the same time, you have to stand up to an undercurrent of the opposition to that bill. There are a lot of folks who have told me, hey, people just like getting free movies. People just like getting free movies, and if they could get free beer, it would be only a few politicians that would be against that too. We need to make it clear that you've got to pay for the entertainment. And at the same time, we've got to make sure that there isn't a system that unduly interferes with YouTube, Facebook, and the rest of the internet.
Thank you. Congressman Berman, and I'd like to give you the full opportunity of a minute and a half to answer this question, since you present yourself and you are known for your advocacy on behalf of Hollywood. You were one of the first co-sponsors.
Let's correct
you were
it.
one of the
Jonah, let's correct those terms. I'm an advocate on behalf of protecting people's property rights.
Okay. You were one of the first co-sponsors of this now basically dead bill, SOPA. Was SOPA good legislation in your view?
Yes. And by the way, I try not to sponsor or co-sponsor a bill as a symbol of my support for the general position, even though I think the language is stupid. The fact is a campaign of disinformation and massive exaggeration and hyperbole was made against this bill by brilliant strategists in the Silicon Valley. But they carried the day. That language is dead. We're going to try and take and work with others, including the Silicon Valley, to deal with the problem of rogue foreign websites, which we can't reach through our copyright laws, and which are producing and distributing millions and millions of copies of illegal pirated works. This is what pays the pensions of people who work in the entertainment industry. They get royalties from the sales of these videos. When everybody can get it for nothing from a foreign rogue website that is based in some country that has no intellectual property protection or doesn't enforce it, that's wrong. That's theft. That's about right and wrong.
Mr. Reed, would you like to answer the same question? Was SOPA, now that you're coming at this with the advantage of hindsight, was it good legislation? Would you have supported it? And if not, what do you propose doing instead? Or how would you come up with crafting that legislation? Who would you consult?
It's a great example of these two individuals appeasing the entertainment industry, trying to get the government to do something to protect intellectual property rights when it's actually incumbent upon the industry to monitor themselves and protect it, and the government to prosecute those who steal. The government with SOPA I'm completely against because it gives the government the authority to actually shut down websites, private websites of our communities, of the free marketplace, not only international, but shut down websites that somebody's uploaded somebody else's material and close it completely down. It's up to the entertainment industry to monitor itself. It's not up to the government to actually monitor the entertainment industry. So it's a prime example of yes before no, and then no before yes. And actually going back to one other thing with Brad Sherman pertaining to TARP, when we discussed TARP. In 2008, yeah, you voted no, but you voted yes the second 2 times it came back with the Senate amendments. Yes, you did. Oh, yes, you did, Brad.
Thank
The Washington Post declared me the leader on the Democratic side against the TARP bill the first time, the second time, and every time.
No.
Mr. Berman may do a little mockery, but the fact is both he and I and most members of Congress have co-sponsored bills which we also see need to go through the markup process. We don't co-sponsor bills on the theory that they won't be marked up. In fact, getting a bill through to the committee for discussion and amendment and improvement is done by co-sponsoring the bill. That's how committee chairs decide which bills deserve that kind of attention. Howard has often co-sponsored bills that he thought needed improvement. I have too.
Just a quick point, Mark. The saying that it should be self-policing is like saying, let's get the cops off the street, let people take cars, let the people who own the cars protect their own cars. We're talking about property rights. And the government has it. That's what the government is for, is to enforce law and to ensure people who don't violate it and to go after the people who do violate it. Brad says, first approach, I cleaned up that TARP. And then I voted against it. And then I voted against it. Brad is right. We oftentimes sponsor or co-sponsor bills that need improvement. But for me, it isn't that 1,000 people are yelling at me that causes me to bail out on a piece of legislation. It's knowing that there are ways to improve that legislation that causes me to want to change it. It's not an action out of fear, that's an action out of perfection, trying to get the legislation to be better.
Thank you. There's been a firestorm that started recently and touched off somewhat of a culture war over the Obama administration's handling of a federal requirement for contraception coverage. I want to get each of your opinions on if you think the Obama administration has handled this correctly. Oh, sorry. I wanted to get each of your opinion on whether you thought the Obama administration has handled its approach to contraception coverage appropriately.
Last year, I sent a letter to the Obama administration saying that the hardworking people who work for hospitals that happen to have a Catholic affiliation or schools that happen to have a Catholic affiliation ought to get the same contraceptive coverage as everyone else. We should protect a woman's right to medical care, and especially preventive medical care. And I took that position at a time when nobody was looking at this issue. I think ultimately the administration's approach is practical because it will make sure that every woman gets the preventive care that she deserves and gets the coverage that's called for by the Obama health reform bill. And so I'm glad that the administration stood to its guns, made a slight adjustment, and followed the advice I gave them back when no one else was focused on the issue.
Mr. Reed.
I think we all have to be very concerned about that of freedom of religion. And forcing religious organizations to engage in birth control is actually a violation of that. And it's cuffing on a very dangerous slope, I believe. And this is all part of some of the poisonous parts of the Health Care Reform Act that has been put into place that hasn't been foreseen. As a parent, as a grandfather of 7, and also as a Catholic, it does concern me just based on those issues. And it's a very, very touchy subject because it's a family subject. But I do believe that it's encroaching upon a very fundamental part of the freedom of religion, and forcing the Catholic churches to actually give contraceptives or pay for abortions or do anything that's against their religious beliefs should concern even this community here, because it is the violation of freedom of religion.
Congressman Berman.
On this issue, I don't agree with Mark. I see eye to eye with Brad, but want to add one thing. The current policy of the administration is not to require the church operations that aren't directly related to the religious institution to provide a particular kind of coverage. The obligation is on every insurance company which wants to provide reproductive care, because for them, on a dollars and cents proposition, it is far less expensive to provide contraceptive care than it is to provide all the other features for people who can't get it. So Brad and I agree on this. Mark and I don't.
Okay. Jonah?
Thank you. Congressman Berman, I'd like to ask you a question about dollars and cents, because often the way that we cover political races is we pay attention to the way in which money is raised. Congressman Sherman has repeatedly mentioned a pledge that he's asked you to sign about super PACs, and I'd like to introduce a couple of facts and ask you the question in a different way. At one point in this race, there were 3 super PACs designated as supporting your candidacy. One of those independent organizations officially shut down its operations at the end of January, and the person who started it and shut it down said that part of the reason he did so was because you were uncomfortable with it. The other 2 organizations have raised a combined $21,000 for their efforts. In other words, less than 1% of the amount of cash that your campaign had on hand at the same time. Congressman Sherman is asking you to sign a pledge that would cost you, if those super PACs didn't ever spend that money or stopped raising that money now, it would cost you less than 1% of the more than $2 million that you have on hand. You've said that you support a constitutional amendment that would eliminate super PACs, but that's unlikely to happen in the months between now and June's primary. So if you're not comfortable with the super PACs having an influence, and at this point it seemingly won't cost you very much, why not sign Congressman Sherman's pledge?
Well, thank you. I appreciate your financial advice. I didn't like Citizens United decision. I support a constitutional amendment to overturn it. The people who have contacted me about contributing to a super PAC, none of which I started, none of which I was involved with, and none of which I coordinate with, those people I have told invariably, contribute to me, raise funds for me if you've already maxed to me, because I want to control the campaign strategy of my campaign. I don't want somebody else to. Brad's pledge is a gimmick, but it's a gimmick that works in the wrong direction, because to the extent that I have to return the funds I have raised, the money that I'm out working hard to raise, because someone is putting money into a super PAC that I don't have the control of the strategy on, you're empowering the super PACs and you're weakening the candidate's campaign committee. You say it's $21,000 today. I don't know what it will be, and his pledge doesn't put a cap on $21,000.
That's true, but so far...
Are we debating? Are we debating?
No. I did want to ask one quick follow-up question about it. The conversation at this point has become about super PACs for your opponent. He sent out a mailer that specifically targeted a contribution that was made from a corporation to a super PAC supporting you. Wouldn't signing his pledge stop all of this ridiculous conversation?
Well, the mailing Jonah hasn't talked about was essentially tying me to the horrible tragedy in Northern California, because some super PAC received a $10,000 contribution. But Brad's mailing helped. I now have Senator Barbara Boxer talking about what a wonderful record I have and supporting my candidacy. I'm here to advocate a pledge proposal a day and a smear mailing a day from the Sherman campaign. I think my campaign has already taken off, but it will really peak if he keeps doing that.
Congressman Sherman.
Howard, you can't have your super PAC and eat it too. You can't go tell people you're for campaign finance reform to the point of amending America's Constitution and then avoid signing a pledge. Now, Elizabeth Warren and Senator Scott Brown are running for the Senate in Massachusetts, probably the biggest campaign in the country other than the presidential campaign. They signed a pledge pretty much similar to the one I first proposed. They're keeping super PACs and unlimited corporate contributions out of Massachusetts. Let's keep them out of the Valley. Now, to say that super PACs aren't helpful is to ignore that Newt Gingrich and Mitt Romney are alive today in their campaigns only because of their super PACs. The fact is that when you open the Valley to super PACs, you open the Valley to having its congressmen selected based on unlimited campaign contributions from giant corporations. The thing to do is to sign the pledge. And finally, the idea that you're not encouraging people to donate, your website describes the super PACs under the word donate. But more importantly, you have put out the word, yes, you want people to contribute to your campaign, but there's a maximum, no more than $2,500. Then you want them to raise for your campaign. But you have also put out the word, and some of your very top supporters have put out the word, after you give him $2,500,
Thank you.
then think of $25,000 for the super PAC.
Like a rebuttal, Congressman Berman.
I repeat, it's a gimmick, and I add to that, since Brad, who accumulated $3.6 million over 10 years to get ready for this race, learned, and the people knew that the race, the two of us were running in the same race, his fundraising has collapsed. Of course he wants a pledge. Of course he wants a gimmick. Of course he wants to do something to change the direction of a campaign that he started out with much more money, much more of the district, and it's slipping away from him.
Congressman Berman.
Wait, I'm sorry. Congressman Sherman, quick response.
I simply want this race decided under the rules that you and I say we both support. And as for whether this race is slipping away, yes, the poll in August said I was ahead 2-1. The independent poll that was released 3 weeks ago says I'm ahead 2-1. In every straw poll after every mutual speech or forum, I'm ahead roughly 2-1. This race is not slipping away. What's slipping away is campaign finance control and reform. What's slipping away is our dedication to constitutional values.
Congressman, sorry. Mr. Reed.
I
want to talk about
I like your
Citizens
mistake, Congressman Reed. What we're watching here is exactly what I referred to in the beginning. Two leaders of failed policies. The reality of it is the tip of the iceberg is being discussed. McCain-Feingold should actually be eliminated. Super PACs should be eliminated. Contributions from unions should be eliminated, because what's happening right now is our campaigns are actually being taken over by multimillionaires, unions, and special interests. The truth of it is both of these individuals' campaigns are being financed by people outside of this district. Where is our voice? Who's funding our voice? Who are they speaking for? This district or the people funding them? This is what needs to be addressed. So the tip of the iceberg is super PACs. So what? Get rid of McCain-Feingold. Get rid of the union PACs. Get rid of all of the independent expenditures that are existing way before the super PACs.
Congressman Berman, let's get down to the street level, or the
Let's get up to the street
freeway.
level.
Let's get down to the freeway level. Some very big valley transit highway projects, transit projects are in the federal highway bill, which is now unfortunately tied up near death or somewhere in Congress. And these include the Sepulveda Pass Transit Corridor connecting the valley to West LA, and, if we may dream, maybe one day to LAX. What are you doing to speed up the funding of these projects, and especially the plan proposed by the mayor to accelerate funding for these projects in LA?
The leadership of this House will never, of the House of Representatives, will never give that proposal serious consideration. But it's a very good proposal because of what it does. It takes the local revenues coming from a surtax that the voters approved, and it allows it to be bonded to create that kind of stimulus that I was talking about earlier, to build things that will make our transportation system much better, attract new industries, deal with the strangulation of congestion by bonding that money. It's called allowing us to do these projects more quickly than in the 30 years we would need to wait under Proposition R. Our hope here is that the Senate Transportation Committee, whose leader is Barbara Boxer, and who's a strong supporter of this, is able, in the context of a conference committee, which is the same place that I was able to get the 405 declared a project of national significance, will come alive, and we will be able to make that happen through that vehicle. It's not going to come from the House of Representatives transportation bill, which is a complete disaster. And my guess is the two of us don't disagree on that issue.
Congressman Sherman, would you like to have 45 seconds to speak on this issue and respond?
I generally agree with Howard. That bill is a disaster. We need a much stronger bill. We also need the 3010 program, and we need it nationwide so that we can start projects around the country, but especially here in Los Angeles, that we have agreed to tax ourselves to pay for. We need to build more quickly. That's why in 2009 and 2010, I spent countless hours trying to get the Obama Secretary of the Treasury to support that concept of lending federal money to the transportation authorities here in Los Angeles. I got them convinced just about the time that we lost our majority. The fact is that had they proposed the National Infrastructure Bank back at the beginning of this administration, I think we'd be in much better shape.
Mr. Reed?
Again, this is almost like our Social Security fund. We've had a tremendous amount of money over the decades put into the highway taxes. It's not put into the infrastructure, it's put into the general fund, it's spent. Now it becomes a topic of today because we want jobs. This is a gimmick once again. The real truth of it is the country is broke and we don't have the money, and this is what they're battling over, is how much money do you shift from here to there to there. I personally would do anything to rebuild the infrastructure of our highways and roads. As pertaining to the bills that they're discussing, I don't know the particular bills they're discussing. However, but it is known fact that the highway funds and taxes, gasoline taxes, go into the general fund, and they're not put back into the highways, they're just put into the general fund.
So we're at the point where we should be starting closing statements, but there is one last question I'd like to ask. If the candidates would consent to speak for 45 seconds on this subject, that would be great. Okay? The subject is medicinal marijuana. In the last few months, Attorney General Eric Holder and the Federal Drug Enforcement Agency have begun taking a harsher approach to medical marijuana dispensaries in California, threatening the operators of dispensaries, which are legal under state and local laws, and their landlords with criminal charges. Somewhere between half a dozen and a dozen such dispensaries are located in the 30th District, providing treatment for a variety of ailments to voters. Efforts have been made by members of the California delegation in Congress to encourage the administration to reclassify cannabis as a drug carrying a lower criminal penalty. Last August, Democratic Representative Barney Frank introduced legislation that would end the federal prohibition on marijuana. That bill has 20 co-sponsors. Neither of you are co-sponsors to that bill. Considering that marijuana has been shown to have legitimate medical uses and that medical use of marijuana is legal in California, the question to Mr. Reed first and then to Congressmen Berman and Sherman, would you support a federal legislation that would end the prohibition on marijuana? Mr. Reed.
I would support classifying it as medicine because it is a medicine. However, under the current use or direction of these medical marijuana clinics, there's just stone and it's marijuana shops to get stoned. You can show up to any doctor and pay $45 and get a prescription. It's not being used as medical marijuana. It's just legal drug dealing at this point. But it's pertaining to actually putting it under the FDA and classifying it as a true medicine and regulating it as a true medicine. Yes, I'm for that because there are medicinal uses for it. And that's been proven for decades.
Congressman Sherman, would you support reclassifying marijuana as not a Schedule I drug?
I support my state in its decision to have medical marijuana and to properly zone where the dispensaries are located and for it to be a real treatment for real diseases, not, oh gee, I got an itch on my forehead, I'd like my weed. I have supported the bills that would move marijuana down one schedule and allow the California law to take effect. The supporters of that law have decided to get a little more extreme, and they want it changed 2 schedules, and at that point, I am not with them. We ought to move marijuana down 1 schedule that would allow California law to operate the way it was intended.
Congressman Berman?
Well, I think there's elements of what both of my partners here have said that I agree with. If you want to have a debate and a discussion about the decriminalization of marijuana, then have it. I certainly think that for wherever there are useful medicinal purposes, people who have the illness that needs that treatment should be able to get it. But don't do a con job which essentially says in the name of providing medicinal marijuana, we're going to decriminalize it.
Thank you. It's time for closing statements, gentlemen. We're going to do it in the same order that we did the opening statements in. So, Mr. Reed, would you go first?
Again, I'm running for Congress because of the failed policies of the last 30 years. We've watched these 2 individuals argue about the policies that have failed for the last 30 years and who actually sponsored them, who voted yes for them, and we're just suffering that. I'm a product of a lieutenant commander of the United States Navy, and I learned to pledge my allegiance to this nation. I did not learn to pledge my allegiance to a political party. I am a registered Republican, but at certain times I will even challenge my own party, unlike these 2, with a 97% party line vote. We are not all Democrats in this valley. We're not all Republicans in this valley, but we sure are all taxpayers in this valley. I'm looking to represent you as a true representative and not a party hack. I will challenge my party when need be because I believe there's only 2 entities that are 100% correct all the time. That is my God and my wife. So remember, there's more than 2 candidates in this election, in this race. And it's not about a Republican or a Democrat. It's not about Jewish or not Jewish. It's about you versus the status quo. This is the status quo. We need change. We need a real voice in the San Fernando Valley. Thank you.
Thank you. Congressman Sherman.
I want to thank everyone for coming here, but especially my wife and my mother. I look forward to seeing you all at my town hall, Reseda High School, 3 p.m., our 160th Valley Town Hall. That would be Sunday, this Sunday, 3 p.m. What we've learned today is that there are real differences between the candidates here. I've stood up to my party on at least 3 important occasions. I stood up to our leadership and said no to the $700 billion bailout. I've said no to the free trade agreements that are shipping our jobs overseas. And I said no to President Obama when he thought the 67 borders were the right place to begin in negotiating a settlement in the Middle East. I think that that I've accomplished some important things in Congress, such as writing the U.S.-Israel Energy Cooperation Act, which is providing for cooperative research to be done by U.S. and Israeli institutions, and also letting all Americans know that when you think of Israel, don't think of Suris, think of science. I led the effort. Oh, just 10 more seconds. The Super PAC pledge is hardly a gimmick. Both candidates in the state of Massachusetts have agreed to sign it because it's a practical solution to the polluting of campaigns with unlimited corporate contributions. I stand with the Holocaust victims in their effort, and I've co-sponsored the bill, and I'm the only one here who has. I call for the release of Jonathan Pollard, and I call for moving the embassy to Jerusalem, no waivers, no exceptions, and no delays. I ask you for your vote, and in return, I promise I will give you a quarter century of future service to fighting for the values that we care about, both domestically and in the Middle East. Thank you.
Congressman Berman.
Well, I knew God was right, and I know my wife is right. I didn't know that, well. Thank all of you for participating, really, in the democratic process. The question I pose here is, what accounts for my overwhelming support among elected and civic leaders? All 5 county supervisors, from the very liberal to the very conservative, have endorsed me. They aren't saying, let's stick together. These guys hardly ever stick together. They're saying, whether it's federal dollars for more police, a fair share of transportation dollars to relieve our strangling congestion, money for the costs of jailing criminal aliens, Berman is the go-to guy. When the former chairman of the Republican National Committee endorses me, he's saying, sorry, Mark, a Democrat is going to win this seat. And Berman cares about and is effective at strengthening our national security. When the Valley's largest private sector industry, from stagehands to composers, from movie directors to studio executives, comes together to support me, they're saying Berman's efforts to combat piracy and keep film production means more jobs for the Valley and more investment. And when the leaders of the pro-Israel community come together on my behalf, they're saying we need to keep Howard in Congress to lead on Iran and the U.S.-Israel relationship. And when both U.S. senators, and 23 of our 25 colleagues in our delegation say, we're with Howard, they're saying, we work with both of these guys every day, and we want Berman to stay here. So, my last sentence, my goal here is to demonstrate that the confidence you've placed in me and the honor you've given me has not been betrayed, and thanks for giving me the chance to make that case.
Thank you very much. Could we have a round of applause for all the candidates? I want to thank you all for coming. There's literature at the candidates' tables outside, and have a safe drive home.